Now, the East African community yesterday formally admitted Somalia as a member of the regional bloc. The decision came during the 23rd ordinary meeting of heads of state in Arusha, Tanzania. But to the average business person in Uganda or East Africa as a whole, what does this decision mean? Now, to help us appreciate the importance of the development, we do have JOHN WALUGEMBE, the Executive Director, Federation of Small and Medium Enterprises. Good evening and welcome to Talk of the Nation.
Good evening, Mildred. Thank you for having me this evening.
Yes. Now, to the average business person, what does the decision to accept Somalia into the bloc mean to them?
So in theory, it's a good thing. Somalia comes on board with a population of 17 million. It also comes on board with a 3,000-kilometer coastline. So technically speaking, that's good for trade. But at the same time, we have to interrogate whether Somalia was ready. Some of us think they were not. Article 3 of the EAC Treaty puts in place certain criteria for a member to join in the areas of good governance, in the area of security, and honestly speaking, Somalia has not met that criteria, in spite of the fact that they first expressed interest in 2012. So it's just like you have a student who has sat P7 10 times, and you just say, let him go to S1 because we are tired of seeing the same face. But what that means is that the EAC now has to deal with a lot of security challenges that Somalia is facing. The EAC has to deal with a lot of territorial disputes that Somalia has with a number of its neighbors, including Djibouti, Kenya, and Ethiopia. Okay. Yes.
So what does Somalia have to bring to the table in terms of business opportunities for an average entrepreneur?
Well, as I said, Somalia is different from when it was. As you know, Somalia has been in upheaval since 1991, with when His Excellency Said Barre was overthrown. Now, thanks to the efforts of Kenya and Uganda and Burundi, there has now been a certain level of calm and stability, and Mogadishu is beaming from a business perspective. So we think that them joining the community is a good thing. You're likely to see more investors coming from Somalia into the other countries. You're also likely to see more more Ugandans, for instance, going to explore opportunities in Mogadishu and in Somalia. But I also need to mention one thing, that Somalia has an issue with Somaliland, Breakaway region. It has its capital in Hargeisa, so some countries already have representation, like Kenya. They have representation in Hargeisa, so how are they going to resolve that? I think that's the other headache that this decision brings on their table.
And actually that brings me to our next question when it comes to Ugandan traders to have to compete with the likes of Kenya that are actually just neighboring Somalia. How are we going to handle that?
Well, thankfully we have an airline. So I think that would make movement fairly easy. But also, if you look at some of the transport corridors that are being worked on, they can make trade easy for us. But I think for me, my concern is not that, it's the fact that even within the 3 EAC countries, we are not as aligned as we say we are. So the political leaders seem to, every time they meet, they seem to just shake hands and admit other people, but they don't address the core issues. So if you look at the non-tariff barriers that we've been experiencing as a country in Kenya, in South Sudan, when you look at this petroleum crisis now that you've just run, it's an example of the EAC failing to work. Because why is it that the Ugandan government now has to buy fuel from middlemen? And why, so the fact that Kenya and Uganda cannot work together, or the EAC for that matter cannot import petroleum products as a whole, is an indictment on this project. Yes. Okay,
so let's look at the regulations that we would have to bear in mind when it comes to importing or exporting from Somalia.
Well, Somalia is joining the East African Common Market. So when you have a common market, it means that there's free movement of goods, of services, of people, and of capital. So it means that so long as you are an EAC citizen, you can just travel to Somalia with your national ID card, the same that the way we do when you're traveling to Kenya or Tanzania or whatever. So there are no restrictions. Same with products. They shouldn't be. Sometimes they are, and that's why we talk about non-tariff barriers. You bring products and then they start saying, oh, this standard, that standard.
Yes, because I was about to bring that example up of, you know, we've had cases of Nairobi we're putting a halt on our milk, and also Sudan putting a ban on the maize. Yes, and so those are not some of the things that we are going to experience with Somalia. You think the case is different? No,
we are likely to experience the same, because some of these countries that join with their inherent weaknesses, because when you're talking about the EAC common markets, it's competition, you see. You have to compete. So some of these countries, because they can't compete, they tend to rely on non-tariff barriers. That's why you see Sudan is saying that we have aflatoxins, but does Sudan even have the mechanism to test whether they are aflatoxins or not? So it's simply copying from Kenya because it's seeing Kenya is using this tool to protect its local market and so on. So if Somalia does the same, then it won't be adding value to the market. We must ensure that there's fair competition. Business people are allowed to move. If Ugandan business people are offering a cheaper product, so be it. If it's Kenyan, so be it. Countries shouldn't go back into their nationalistic cocoons and try to block others from trading freely.
So let's look at their currency, the Somalia currency. How flexible is it with the Ugandan shilling? Because, I mean, now we are going to be, you know, in trade and, you know, business opportunities exchanging here and there.
I don't think that's a big deal. In any case, as East Africa, we are moving towards monetary union. Of course, that also requires countries to be to kind of align their monetary and fiscal policies, which I mean, we've been moving it. We were supposed to be in 2024. It's been moved a bit. So, but ideally, we should be having a common currency so that it eases trade within the region. So the fact that we have to kind of convert currencies and so on is a headache. But hopefully, the monetary union dream can come to pass. Of course, it requires more work than the common market. And that's why I would not encourage them to move towards the common currency without making sure that there's parity in certain on certain parameters.
So if I'm a business person in Kampala, what are some of those interesting things about Somalia that I need to bear in mind when doing business with them?
No, I think, for instance, I would tell people that if you look at how much mirror that is sold in Somalia by Kenya, it's huge. It's a huge business. Uganda should start growing mirror. Let's not grow things that don't have market. You see, if people take mirror into Somalia, it's not our business to judge them. Let's produce what they want and export and make money. This is the point. The other issue is that you have a lot of charcoal business. I don't know, maybe there are a lot of charcoal being imported through Kismayo and so on. How can we, I'm not encouraging Ugandans to sell charcoal, but what other things can we offer them so that they don't have to cut down trees? Because it's not sustainable if you look at issues around climate change and so on. So let's try to look at Somalia as is. The construction sector is booming, so they'll definitely need certain things. If you look at education, they definitely want good education. So can we export that service, good healthcare services? So let's try to explore the market. That's the starting point.
Okay. Yes. Like you've clearly highlighted, its security is unstable. And what does working with or in Somalia entail, and what are some of the challenges that we'll have to overcome in order to make profit? You have clearly highlighted some of the businesses or some of the areas we can leverage on when it comes to doing business with Somalia. No,
so I think Ugandans must understand that if you want to make profit, there must be a certain element of risk. You can't wait to Somalia to stabilize and then you say, I'll go there when it is like Washington, DC, or it's like Cape Town. Then at that point, there won't be many opportunities. So those people who are willing to risk now are those that will be able to make some kind of return in that market. So I would urge Ugandans to take the risk. Obviously, the security issue will always be at the back of your mind. It's only important that you take the necessary precautions, that you understand where the risks are, you know. But At the same time, I would not encourage you to say we won't go to Somalia because there are security risks. No, security risks can be anywhere. So it's important that we go and explore that market. We don't want to lament after 3 years. Oh, Ugandans went, we sent our army there, we spent many years stabilizing Somalia. Now you see other countries are benefiting. The same lamentation we made in South Sudan. It would be, because Ugandans, it's Uganda that first took troops to Somalia. And it's Uganda that has stayed the course. All these other countries have just come in because they wanted to be part of the party. That's my view. It's Uganda that paid the ultimate price, and therefore we need to ensure that we benefit from that economy.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, John Walugembe, the Executive Director, Federation of Small and Medium-Sized Enterprises. Well, that conversation takes us in for another break. When we return, we'll hear from the world of sport.